the set that we're making is looking pretty great, but it really needs some color to separate out all these visual elements. If everything's gray, even in the lowest resolution, the lowest kind of detail level of our film, everything's going to look flat. So we need to start visually separating these pieces out from each other so that we can get that good sense of depth and we can make sense of all of the moving parts, literally all the moving parts of our animation. Now, in the final film of this, if you've watched the film, there are some wonderful texture sets that have been applied to all of these. Those texture sets are so large, it really is like 4 gigabytes of texture data for the entire set. I wasn't able to provide those to you, but we can use simple materials to start describing the role and the function of each one of these buildings. I want to focus all of my energy on this great hardware store. I like this one. One of the challenges that we have, though, before we get into selecting the materials, is that we like working in the solid shading style, but it's difficult to see all the different parts and pieces. And when it comes time for material assignment, being able to differentiate one polygonal piece from another polygonal piece is super important. So here's kind of a great little trick, something that a lot of folks do, myself included. If we go into this arrow at the top of our viewport shading styles, we have a great option here called cavity. If we turn it on, this is what it's going to look like. Okay, this is the default values. And what it's doing is that it's making the edges a lot brighter. This is a little intense for me. It looks a little almost kind of jarring. So one of the things that I like to change in that cavity property is we go in from screen space to world space. And now it just kind of softens it a little bit. It makes it look like there's nice soft shadows in all the corners. And that's a big helper to help us understand, all the different geometric parts and pieces on the model. As we get in close here, for example, let's just do the door. Here's with it on, and here's with it off. So it helps and just makes things pop just a little bit, enough for us to make some intelligent collections. Now, I'm not going to do this entire thing because it would take some time, but if you want to start visually separating this out, I would really encourage you to do so. We can build a small collection of materials, maybe 4 or 5 that we can reuse over and over and over again to help us get a little bit more information. Each one of the buildings has its own dedicated material already assigned to it, which is kind of nice. So if you'd like, at the very least, you can have maybe one color per building. In the final film, if you've noticed it and watched the film, the hardware store is this wonderful yellow. It's a little bright for my tastes at the moment, but there we go. Something in that realm. Not too bad. Okay, so at the very least, you could use the default material that's available on every single one of these just to kind of give it a color. I might go one step further here and add let's go back to the hardware store. I might add just a secondary or 2 or 3 different materials in here just to break it up quickly. I'm not trying to do every single piece because that would be a lot. And when I textured these myself, it was a lot, but that's okay. It was worth it. It was a lot of fun, and the film turned out great, in my opinion. I think separating out the ground planks into their own is going to help visually start to separate these elements away from each other. Having a nice brown for the planks, the decking, and maybe for the doors. I think that'll be good enough for what it is that we're trying to do. So let's add a new slot in our material library. We have a slot. Let's put a new material in there, and I'm just going to call this one brown decking. There we go. And of course, we're going to want to give it a nice color too. Something like that. Okay, so we've made the material. In order for us to apply the material, we have to go into edit mode. Hitting the tab key with the object selected will allow us to go in and work with all the vertices, edges, and polygons. Now here's my little trick. I like working in my polygonal selection state because we can do this very quickly when we hit the L key. We could go in and select each individual face, but that is not what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit the L key. The Blender interface is really intelligent. It understands where the cursor's location is at any given time. When you hit the L key, it's selecting all of the faces that are glued or welded together to that one piece. And I can just very quickly just put my cursor over each one of these planks, hit the L key real fast, and we're up and running. Just takes a minute. Nothing too shabby here. There are a lot of ways that we can make selections. This is just one of those ways. This is kind of like the brute force way, which isn't always necessarily bad. Sometimes it just takes a minute. Not everything is fast and easy. Sometimes, oops, I hit undo. I accidentally clicked off of it. I don't want to. I'm going to grab the stringers on the bottom of this decking as well. There we go. That's good enough. Now, with that selected, we can apply it to the actual brown decking material. The only way to do this is in edit mode with the selection, because once we have the polygon selected and the material selected, we can hit assign, and it automatically assigns the details of this material to whatever was selected here a moment ago. Oops, excuse me. I apologize. Zoomed out. That was kind of crazy. All right, let's get back in there. Haha. What's neat about this system inside of Blender is that these are live materials. So if we decide it's too dark, we certainly could go in, make some small changes to the colors of this, and keep going on. Adding materials and textures is really easy, and I'll encourage you to do so. It's going to help break out all of these elements visually and help you create a much more visually intense and three-dimensional scene that's going to make your film just kind of stand out a little bit. I know that we're just kind of practicing making all this stuff, but the more detail that we can infuse and layer in, the more detailed your final film is going to look, and it's going to look a whole lot cooler too.